Hi, it's Darren from SimNation again. Just doing a quick recap video for WWPF, which of course is our Wolverine Studios Draft Day Sports Pro Football 2023 League. A lot has happened since last week when I did my last recap video. Hopefully you liked the one about the rushing attack. I do intend to do one this week that will be more focused on elements of defense, specifically pass defense. I hope that will help some people because I know I've gotten a couple questions about how do you do pass defense, especially since Pittsburgh right now has one of the top pass defenses. I'll give you my insights. It's different based on how you want to run it, but we'll start with the recap. So last week we started in the NFC. This week we'll start in the AFC. So we'll start at the bottom of the AFC. Um, just quick recap, Oakland is on a winning tier again, and we'll talk a little bit about how they got there, but definitely Peter was very much in the mix for one of the top two spots. At this point, he's got the West locked up. It's his. Denver is one of the many teams that are in contention for essentially one of the two wild card spots. And at 7-6, I think they get Pittsburgh this week, so that'll be a tough matchup. Largely San Diego and Kansas City are out at this point. I don't, unless they go on a massive tear and everybody else loses, I don't really see them coming back. So Denver's the only team in the West outside of Oakland that has a shot at the playoffs this year. The East, there's still a little bit of a fight between the Jets and the Patriots. I think if the Jets win this week, they probably are going to be able to lock it up. Um, I don't see DP losing many games. That team is just phenomenal this year, and I'll talk about them in a second. Uh, Shark should make it into the playoffs as a wild card. He definitely has the lead, but he'll want to try to um, kind of get back into that East race. Had he just lost one game to the Jets, I think he would have been fine. If he had just lost two games, kind of still be in it. But losing three, it really gives DP the opening to take the East here shortly. Miami and Buffalo are out, so Soa has had an up and down season. Um, I think that there's no way that they get into the playoffs. In the South, Indianapolis is, of course, Rick, and he's having a phenomenal year, like New York and Pittsburgh and Oakland. He's very much in the race for the one or two spot. Um, and he's already pretty much guaranteed he's in the playoffs as the South champion. It's just a matter of is he going to get the first round bye or not. Jacksonville is one of those teams that's in the hunt for that fourth spot. I'm sorry, that second playoff spot. So Starfinder is Jacksonville, and he's definitely going to be trying to play out of his mind so that way he can secure that playoff spot. Tennessee's a new coach. This is Bama. Uh, they just joined the league. He inherited some mess at Tennessee, but I'm pretty sure that he'll get it under order. And of course, JP, despite the really strong draft, is maybe not having as good of a year at Houston as he wanted to, but it is his first season, so there's a period of calibration. And I think that he will definitely do a pretty good job next year. But the season's largely over for both Tennessee and Houston. They're playing for pride and draft positioning now. Up in the north, Pittsburgh still remains undefeated. Um, I don't expect them to stay undefeated. They're going to lose here shortly if Denver doesn't do it this week. But fighting also for that second and last playoff spot in the wild card is Cincinnati and Baltimore. I think Cleveland could sneak back into the conversation, but I don't think so. I think Bio's season's largely over. Kevin's at Baltimore. He'll want to win his games so he can stay competitive against Denver, Jacksonville, and well, really Denver, Jacksonville, and Cincinnati. So Kevin actually controls a lot more of his destiny than some of the other teams do, especially since he has the ability to knock some of the other teams out of the conversation. We'll go to the NFC North and talk about them. Green Bay's pretty much in. I think if you look at this, There's a lot of competition still with Chicago, Minnesota, New Orleans, Washington, New York, and LA for that final spot. Um, but largely the playoff picture in the NFC is like the AFC. There's really only one slot that's being played for from a wild card perspective at this time. And most of the conference races outside of the West are not really competitive. Now, Green Bay by no means, and this is DWK, has it locked up. He's got to finish strong, probably win his next two games to be able to end the conversation there and get ready for the playoffs. Rick, who's at Minnesota, has a lot to say about it, as does Pops, because they still have a lot of games in the North to play against each other. Carolina, Invisible Witness has just done a great job with Carolina throughout the season. Definitely has already locked up the South. Now he's playing for, right now he is the number one seed, and unless he goes on a losing tear, he's got the number one seed locked up. A lot of the fight is still for the number two. As I mentioned, New Orleans, who's a CPU team, is still very much in the hunt for a potential wild card bid. In the East, Templar has a pretty good shot at being the East champion, but he's got to get off his losing streak. Washington lost, of course, to Pittsburgh in the last game. Cable was at New York, so Udo's at Washington, New York. We have a human coach at Philadelphia again. Um, but the East is pretty wide open. It could still go really against Dallas. Dallas now is trying to compete for the number two spot, but right now they're on the outside looking in, and they're just trying to secure the East so that way they can make it into the playoffs. But if Washington gets hot, New York gets hot, if Philadelphia gets hot, this one's still pretty wide open. I do like Dallas, though. I do think that they're going to take it in the end. Templar's not known for staying on long losing streaks. The West is pretty wide open right now. So, in theory, San Francisco has the playoff wild card, one of the two. Los Angeles is still very much in the hunt for the second one. Arizona would be the conference winner or division winner if they did it. Both of these two teams are fighting for that second spot, which would give them a bye in the playoffs. So I still like San Francisco Hill. Arizona's having a much better year than anybody thought they would, but Stewart's a strong coach, and I have a lot of faith that he's going to be able to get in there and win it. Um, so that's kind of the lay of the land from a playoff picture. So right now, a lot of fight in the AFC for that 1 and 2 spot. Um, and really, the fight in the AFC for the wild card is for the second one. The first one is going to be New England. Uh, and then in NFC, I think Carolina's largely locked up the number one, so everyone's fighting for the number two or fighting to get into the playoffs. Will Green Bay, Dallas, Arizona, San Francisco all could get that second seed, which would allow them to have a bye. Um, and then those teams are also the ones I think that largely are in the playoffs, whereas New Orleans and Los Angeles today are fighting for that last wild card spot. If we go through the teams real quick, and I'm going to really focus more on the human teams as opposed to everyone else. This is Steve. Atlanta had a lot of issues, and he's getting them competitive. One, he had a pretty bad schedule. He had a one schedule, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just looking real quick. Yeah, he had a one schedule. Um, so because Atlanta won last season, they just had a lot of holes. He's had to fill a lot of those quickly. I think that Atlanta should be back next season and should be fine. Pierre Howell, of course, is one of the best people he has, along with Broderick for it. He hasn't had a lot of injuries, but again, just Atlanta drafted badly. They didn't re-sign a lot of people. It's just a lot of mess still. Kevin was having a good season, and then his quarterbacks got hurt. And since then, he's been trying to play back into the playoff picture. Um, this string of games, he was, I think, without his quarterback, but he did beat Cable in his last go around. If Murray's healthy, I think that they have a good shot of making the playoffs. Their schedule is actually somewhat favorable to making it because they should be able to beat San Diego, Cincinnati, even though they did lose to them. And then Houston will be a toss-up. I don't. Pittsburgh will be a close game, but Pittsburgh is playing on a different level right now. But we'll see. Again, he has a lot of control of his playoff future. Carolina, they're playing for the number one seed, uh, and right now they have it. So not the easiest of schedules going forward, but it's a manageable one where if they win two of the four, they've got the number one seed. Zelensky's just having a monster season along with Andrade. So they beat Princess last week, beat Steve earlier in the week. So I expect Carolina to be the team to beat right now in the NFC. Bio Eagle started to get a winning streak going, losing to Philadelphia. Uh, that's a hard game no matter what. The loss to Cable was probably a heartbreaker. He played Oakland close. He's had an up and down season, but largely a good season. Hillman's having a really good season. I think the biggest problem that he's starting to run into is some of his key players are getting hurt, which is making it a little bit harder for Cleveland to find the balance that they need to win. Having Pittsburgh twice, that could really hurt their chance. I mean, in theory, if they win out, they would have a chance at the playoffs, but um, they're going to have to beat Pittsburgh twice to do that, and that's a pretty tall order this season. Um, Dallas, they had righted the ship and they've lost a couple really, really close games. If you look at this, is all but one of the losses that Templars had have been by less than a touchdown or a touchdown. So they lost a 1 point game to New York. They lost a 3 point game to New Orleans, 7 points to both Cincinnati and Washington. The schedule is a little bit favorable. I don't expect them to beat Carolina, but they should be able to beat the Jets and the Redskins. I'm sorry, the Giants and the Redskins, and then Tampa Bay. So it all hinges on how well Martin is doing. If he has a good game, they should be fine. If he doesn't, I don't know how well they're going to do. But again, I see Dallas as a playoff team. They should win their division. Denver, of course, is playing for a playoff spot. They only have 3 games left. They're at 6-6, if I remember. So they've got to win at least two of their next three to have a good shot at the playoffs as a wild card, get that last wild card spot. To do that, they've got to win against either Pittsburgh, Kansas City, or San Diego. The latter two probably are the chances at wins, although Alt Haven is also at San Diego, and he has an inside shot at making the playoffs, or an outside shot, sorry. So it all come down to the passing game. It doesn't help that Lavelle's hurt. Lavelle is a really good quarterback. So they're going to have to play someone else against Pittsburgh this week. Although James Johnson is just having a monster season, so is Leon Grill. So kudos to Prince. They're having a great thing, and they're 7-6. Sorry. So the reality is, if they win two of their next 3 games, they're in, because then they would be 9-7, and should be able to capture that last wild card spot. Pops has had a really down year. He hasn't been uploading as much, so I think that's part of the issue. But I look forward to him uploading again, and they should do really good. DWK is having a great season with Green Bay in his first season. They've only got stronger since he's taken over. They have some quality wins. The loss to Chicago probably was a little bit of a heartbreaker, but their schedule is actually pretty conducive to them being able to play for that number 2 spot or number 2 seed. Arizona's a tough game. Arizona's having a great season, but Minnesota and Detroit, they should be able to take those games. And then Buffalo's just a horrendous CPU squad, so they should be able to win that. But the key is Seaton's got to continue to keep running like he is. He's the main reason why they're there. I mentioned JP. A lot of people keep bringing up the Ash trade. I have mixed feelings on William Ash. I'm just going to be transparent. I don't think the trade was worth the quality of the quarterback, but Ash himself is not a bad quarterback. I think I mentioned in the Slack, I've been on the receiving end of Ash in his prime when you have a coach that's built a system around him. And I remember seasons where I would be cussing at his name because he knocked Pittsburgh out of a number one or number two seed, and in one season he knocked them out of the playoffs. So Ash is a good quarterback. You just got to build the right system. I'm gonna do a video on that specifically and about talking about how you game plan for a quarterback like him. But again, as you can notice by the score lines, recently it's been a bunch of tough, low score losses for him. He lost to San Francisco Stewart, who's a really good coach. He beat Indianapolis. Rick is having a phenomenal season, so that tells you that there's potential. They'll lost a close one to Starfinder, lost a close one to the CPU at Tennessee. So there's a potential that they could really get on a winning streak. Though out of the playoffs, they don't have a chance at it. But you could get your feet under you for next season. And again, bear in mind, this is JP's first season at Houston. Uh, Talking about a wildly successful first-year coach in Rick, the Luna trade was a masterpiece. He's definitely made the most out of it. As you can see, is Luna's just having a phenomenal year, and so is Indianapolis. 10-2. I still, I think we'll see what happens this week. They play the Jets tonight. If they can beat the Jets, they should be able to secure at least the 2 spot and play for the 1 spot. Because again, I do expect Pittsburgh to slip up. Now, they can't lose to Houston on the rebound, and Jacksonville and Tennessee both have human coaches. So he's not going to get a pause, but Rick's had a great season. I'm pretty confident. If outside of Pittsburgh and Oakland, I think those are the few teams that can actually beat the Jets. Um, I think Indianapolis has a chance of beating them. It all will depend on whether DP actually uploads or not. But I think I like his chances of beating the Jets. And if he beats the Jets, he should be able to get a whole shot and finish the year 14-2, which will likely give him one of the top 2 spots. Jacksonville wise, Starfinder's had a pretty good first year. 6-6 is nothing bad. He does have to win 3 of his next 4 in order to even have a chance at the playoffs. It's a tall order with New England and Indianapolis on the schedule as well as Arizona. I don't think Jacksonville is going to make it to the playoffs this season, but I think Starfinder had a really good first year with Jacksonville. McCulloch, there was a lot of talk about him and how far he dropped in the draft, but he's doing a great job for Jacksonville. And I do think going into year 2, if they get a good draft and some good free agency, I think Jacksonville's going to be competing against Indianapolis for that division. Miami, the wheels have come off on Soa. Uh, this happens a lot, unfortunately. Soa starts the season pretty strong most years, and then it starts to subside. But you can't really say anything bad. Most of his losses are really, really close losses. And no one expected Indianapolis to be good this year. But losing to like Tennessee on CPU, he played New England very, very close. Um, there's a lot of potential on this squad, and it's just a matter of putting it together. And he's getting closer and closer to getting it. So this is one of those seasons that even though he's probably going to finish like maybe 7-9, uh, it will be a 7-9 that could have easily been like a 10-6 or 11-5. He was that close to getting there. And again, he's had injury issues, which has kind of derailed some of his season. Whenever you lose your kicker, that's not good either. But Locklear's had a good season, so has Tan. I do think that one of these seasons he's going to put it together, and it's going to mean trouble for both DP and Shark. So Minnesota, um, just they're on a losing streak right now. They had gotten back into the playoff picture and then have lost 4 straight. So um, part of that is they've come up against some better teams in Green Bay, Detroit, and New York. But again, they've shown potential. I mean, they beat New England, they beat Arizona. Those are some top teams right there. So I think at the end of the day, they have the ability to put it together if they can just get the running game going and match that with the passing. Caldwell's having a good season. Enos has had a good season. He would be in the Rookie of the Year conversation if it wasn't for like Bryant, Lackey, and a couple others. But um, at this point, with that schedule, I don't see Minnesota making the playoffs. I don't think that they're going to be able to beat both San Francisco and Green Bay. And again, though, in one of those situations where they've got to win at least, they pretty much have to win out at this point um, in order to get in. But if they could win 3 out of 4, they might have an outside shot. Shark had that 2 game losing streak again to Indianapolis and Minnesota. He did drop a close one against DP and the Jets. Um, but he bounced back with a pretty solid win against Chicago. Again, Chicago probably scored more points than he wanted him to. Uh, Not characteristic of Shark, right? His defense is a little bit weaker than I thought it would be at this point. But again, he played the Jets, and anytime you play the Jets, they're just going to run the yardage up on you. But if you look at it, it was a close game. It could have went either way. It's just in the end, it went the Jets' way. Hicks didn't have a good game, but Allman did. And of course, anytime you play DP, he's just going to throw the ball against you, and you got to be able to stop it. Um, and then once you start stopping the pass, you suddenly find a guy named Terrell Bryant who's just running at you and obliterating you. But I do like his chances of getting into the playoffs. I don't think he's going to be playing for a 2 seed. Uh, I think that Oakland and Indianapolis have a better chance, as well as the Jets and Pittsburgh. And really, the 1 seed is the Jets versus Pittsburgh, with Indianapolis having an outside shot. But he's got a chance to really screw things up for DP and the Jets in Week 15, which will be right before we do the next update. And then after that, he's got a relatively easy schedule. The Jets is the big game for him. If he can win that game and win out, he could find himself in the 2 seed. But I think he will likely end up being one of the top wildcard teams. We talked about Cable and the Giants. He's still got a chance at the playoffs, actually. This is a winnable schedule for him with New Orleans and Philadelphia twice. Massive kudos to Cable. This was a horrible team last year. They've shown flashes of actually being better this year. Thomas Allen is having a pretty good season. Swafford is having an exceptional season. So he's done a very good job in really what is, I think, his second or third season. So he won't be getting the first round pick again, the first pick in the draft. And just a great season from him. So they could make it to the playoffs. I don't think that they're going to. Philadelphia, I don't see them beating Philadelphia twice, but there was an outside chance that they could win out and find themselves and be the second New York team in the playoffs. Jets are in the playoffs at this point. I mentioned this. I think barring something really strange happening, they should get the 2 seed. Now the challenge is if they lose to Indianapolis and New England, one of those 2 teams is going to get the 2 seed more than likely. But the Bills and Dolphins, I don't see them beating the Jets. I could see Indianapolis. I could see New England beating them. The reality is I think only one of those 2 teams is actually going to probably beat them. So they'll probably likely only have 2 losses on the season, which it'll just be a matter of if Pittsburgh has 2 losses, they need for Pittsburgh to have more than 2 because Pittsburgh has the game in hand. But great year from Spriggs. Jonathan Roberts has already broken the career touchdown record, and he's only like 30, so phenomenal job. DP has just done a phenomenal job with this team in general. Um, Everyone talks about the offense, but as you can see, you can't overlook their defense. They're second to Pittsburgh in defense. So just a phenomenal job with DP on the defensive front too. So the offense gets all the acclaim, but the defense is actually the reason why they're winning some of these games because when they get into the closer games, it's the defense that actually mattered. I will say that there was a way to shut them down, but I'm going to be careful about saying that because I did that in the college league and I actually tanked one of the teams by doing it. So I may talk more loosely and vaguely about how you shut down the passing game of a team like New York. Um, Everyone should be afraid. Peter's on a winning streak, and he's back to his old ways. The defense is now starting to come along for him. The defense has been the Achilles heel for them this year. Denham, can't say enough about him. He's having a really, really good season. For all the Denham detractors, you might have missed the boat though. Andrew Leonard has just been phenomenal, and Brooks is phenomenal. I mean, Peter's got his team humming now on offense, which is something that people should be really afraid of. The defense is starting to come along, and once he gets the defense figured out, we'll roughly be about playoff time. And while I don't think Peter's going to nab one of the top two seeds, he's certainly capable of it because he can win out. But that assumes that the Jets and the Colts and Pittsburgh all lose 1 to 2 games so that he can get back in it. Because with the Jets and Pittsburgh, they both have a game in hand over him. So I think he's going to be the wild card team you don't want to play. And again, when the playoffs come around, Peter's a different animal, and he's really hard to beat in the playoffs. So depending on where he slots in, you actually probably want him to be the higher seed. I know if I'm Pittsburgh and I'm winning, uh, getting the number one seed in the bye, I don't want Peter to be a lower seed in the playoffs. I want him to be the highest possible seed he can be in the wild card, so I don't have to play him in the second round. So just phenomenal job again of balancing this out. Can't say enough about Denham. He's really showing out. As you can see, 33 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. His percentage isn't great. He had a bad game last game, despite the score line, but just overall phenomenal. Philadelphia has a human coach again, and they played in the Cleveland game. I do expect Philadelphia to start turning it around. They've got a really good running attack. Libby is a really good running back, and I think it's going to be interesting to see. The schedule is favorable to Philadelphia going on a winning streak, but I don't think 8-8 gets you in the playoffs. Pittsburgh, again, the big story here is can Pittsburgh stay undefeated? They do have a semi-favorable schedule, although I've never played Bio Eagle well. And Kevin is a hard person to plan against, as is Prince at Denver. So they're playing for the number one seed. They really need to win 2 of the next 4 in order to secure that. Um, but that's also assuming the Jets lose. If the Jets don't lose and they need to win 3 of their next 4, they can lose 1 game and still pull in the number one seed. Lackey is the big reason here, along with that defense, which has just been really phenomenal this year. And I did a video last week about that. Alt Taubman in San Diego, maybe not the season he wanted to have, but when you look at the losses that he has, um, it's an up and down season. It's what you would expect from a first season of having a team, right? These aren't the people you would have necessarily chose, although Althaven did come in with enough time to change that. But again, you can't change your whole roster that quickly sometimes. So he's got a good, favorable schedule to make some noise. But with New England and Oakland, he's going to probably lose 2 of those games, which means that I don't see San Diego getting in the playoff picture. But he could win Baltimore and could win against Denver. And if he does, then it's a respectable 7-9 season, which is a good mark for a first year coach. San Francisco, Stewart is probably being driven crazy by some of the losses he's accrued. Indianapolis makes sense. They're having a great season. Losing to Arizona probably wasn't what he wanted, but he's right in the thick of winning the division and securing a number 2 seed. I don't think he's going to get the number 1 seed. I think Carolina's got that. And the remaining schedule is very conducive to him doing that. He should be able to win all these games, although he did lose to Seattle earlier. I don't expect him to lose to Seattle at home. Farmer's having a great year. So It'll be interesting to see. And again, that defense is really good against the pass. The challenge, I think, is one or two of these teams is actually really good against the run, which is where his weak spot is. And then Tennessee is a new coach. This is Bama. He just literally took over, so we'll see what we're going to get out of him. But Tennessee is a team that's going to miss the playoffs, but they have a lot of potential and a lot of strength. Bama, if you're listening to this, one of the things I would say is when you look at your roster, there's one guy you should start almost immediately. Is this dude, John Olsen? Uh, I'm sorry, Chester Spill. I would be playing Chester Spill every down and running the ball with him because he is a freak. So just take a look at him and then use him accordingly. And then of course Udo at Washington. I don't see Udo making in the playoffs. He can get to 8-8, I think. It's been a bounce of the ball for him with some of his losses that he's lost a lot of close games. But I think Rose has had a decent season. Keysor is just phenomenal. I played them, I think, last week, and Keysor kept me awake about how I was going to shut him down and stop him. If we look at the league leaders, um, not a shock. Lavelle's still up there, although Spriggs probably going to pass him this week. That's really the battle is for who will be the top quarterback. Of course, Lavelle's hurt, so Spriggs should be able to get past him. I mentioned Denham. Denham's having a phenomenal second year. Uh, I get off that because James Martin is our top rated passer, although again, Denham and Spriggs won't show up because they've been injured at different points. Rushing yards, Lackey is still having a phenomenal year, but like I mentioned, Leonard Grill, Seaton, Bryant are also having really good years too. Rushing touchdown wise, Dixon has just been phenomenal this year. I'm going to click this off just to make sure I'm not missing someone. Trey Robb is a really good running back, so really good year from a lot of them. Leonard with 12, he doesn't show up, but he's within striking distance. Receiving yards, you're going to see a lot of Jets Hill. Johnson is just having a really, really breakout season for Denver. Roberts probably would have a bigger year if it wasn't for Martin and the other Jets wide receivers. I mentioned Brooks and Kiesel. Both of them are also doing really, really well. Receiving touchdowns, Johnson just continues to impress. But again, Roberts or Martin probably would have higher receiving touchdowns if it wasn't for the presence of both of them, plus the other Jets wide receivers. From a sacks perspective, Sousa still leads. Hickson was injured, but Sousa's just having a really strong season. Those are really the two guys in the sack category right now. Some others could make up speed. Like, look, keep an eye on Reyes. He has a history of really turning it on near the end of the season. Interception wise, again, there's not a lot of differentiation here. Toller is a I really probably should not have cut him, but I'll leave that alone. Anyways, Tolo is having a great season. Swafford is someone I like a lot. I tried to grab him and wasn't able to meet his things, but Pearson is having a breakout season as well. Um, if we look at just who are in the running for the awards, um, right now, of course, it's Lavelle, Spriggs, Johnson. I do think Leonard's in the running, but I would say it's really Spriggs, Lavelle, and Johnson that probably should be for league MVP. Same thing for offensive MVP. Defensive MVP, Russell Robertson is one of my all-time favorites. He used to be a Steeler. I had him for a while, and I begrudgingly let him go. Hickson, of course, is just a sack machine, but it's really between Hickson and Sousa. I do think that Robertson could get into that conversation relatively easy. Rookie of the year, there's a lot of controversy here. People say the touchdowns matter more than just general production. So Bryan and Alvarez are going to be in that conversation pretty heavily, but you can't look past what Lackey's been doing. And again, his problem is I just don't give him the ball in the red zone. Um, Perry is starting to break out, which is good to see, but Lab and Anderson, Rafferty's not on this list, and he's someone to keep an eye on from Oakland. But I think Lab is kind of ending the debate about which of the linebackers last deal that were drafted is going to be the better of them. But keep an eye on Blair. He's still having a really good season. And then, of course, Trent Anderson's a little bit of a shock because he wasn't, if I remember correctly, he wasn't a high draft pick. Yeah, he was. He was 215. But Perry was someone I was high on. There were a couple other rookies that aren't showing up, but again, like Oakland has Rafferty, who the game has a natural inclination against safeties. We'll show you him real quick. Here he is. So it's not a lot of tackles, but he's got 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, a defensive touchdown. He's doing fairly well in that regard, but still a solid season from him. Whereas if you look at Perry, let's just find. Perry is having a pretty good year as well. 5 sacks, 17 hurries, 13. He's taken over as the starter on the opposite side of Hickson, is which is definitely something that I didn't expect to see so early on with him. I was actually gonna not play him most of this year. And then Dennis Blair's the guy I mentioned. He was the top pick. He's having a good year. I mean, you can't really take away from that. But of course, Indianapolis with Lab, he's having a slightly better year with 89 tackles, 3 interceptions, 4 sacks. So one could almost say Lab may have been the better pick, but again, it all just depends. But I think to me, while I really like Perry, I like Rafferty, I like Stevenson, I think Lab is the defensive rookie of the year. So that's it for now. In the next sim, we will be largely nearing the playoffs and should have a pretty good idea of who's going to be in the playoffs. And then also I will do a series of videos around pass defense and some other things. So hope you liked the video. If you do, hit the like button, and thank you for your time.